Hello everyone, good morning. I hope everyone had a good weekend and everybody's doing well today. The sun is shining, which certainly makes a difference. Today I wanted to talk about reactions to change, specifically acknowledging one of the main emotions that we see all the time, which is around anxiety. So, as many of you who work with us will know, we do a lot of work helping organisations and people with change. We help organisations think about leading change effectively, and we help people to understand transition, process change, and figure out how they go through it. And there's probably no more significant a change than we are all experiencing right now with the impact of coronavirus on pretty much everybody. We've never lived anything like this in our lifetimes, and to think that this won't affect and impact everybody in the world, there's no way it can't. It absolutely will. And so we want to talk a little bit about the way that change and the things that are going right now affect us, and the types of responses and reactions that people will have, and more specifically, because of the types of conversations we've been having the last couple of weeks, how anxiety shows up for people, and the impact of feeling anxious, and what you can do if you're finding that those feelings of anxiety are more than you would want them to be. So your anxiety is normal, which we'll talk about, but when it starts to become something that's preventing you from doing the things you want to do, then we need to think about that. So the first thing I want to talk about is reactions and responses to change. We often don't talk about feelings when we talk about change in organisations, but it's an absolutely fundamental part of helping people figure out and process change effectively. If we don't talk about feelings, if we don't talk about what's going on for us, then we won't work our way through what's happening, and we won't get to where we need to be as people. So particularly with this is not an organisational change. This is something that's affecting everybody in the world. It's something we need to be okay with talking about how we feel about what's going on. And we need to be okay with acknowledging wherever that is, because it's going to be different for different people at different times. Hi, Cindy. So if it's helpful for you to understand the way that people react and process change, then it's worth checking out, Googling the change curve or the grief curve by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And that piece of work looks at the stages of change that we all go through as people, and the way that we respond and we react to change. And you can see it now. You can see it happening in the world right now. So like the first stage of change is shock, and you saw that when COVID hit. You saw how people were like, this can't be happening, this isn't really real, this isn't a big, like, this can't be something that's going on, this has never happened in our lifetime. All of those reactions are very normal and very real. The next stage is denial, and you can still see that in people. So some people have transitioned through denial and other people have not. Other people are still sitting in a place where they're saying things like, oh, this is just the flu and we don't need to socially distance, because they're not processing and coming to grips with the change that's going on. And then there's anger and blame, which we're also seeing in terms of people needing to understand where this came from and who's at fault, and being angry with each other. Those are all really normal parts of processing reaction to change that we also need to understand and help other people with. So as much as we need to know ourselves, where am I and what do I need right now, it can also be helpful to know and understand that this is the general process that people go through, and be supportive and encouraging of helping people move through the change. I'm seeing a lot of people get frustrated with other people in terms of where they are, which is also normal, but we need to help people progress through, and the people that are stuck in places need information to help them move. So the change curve can be a really helpful way of thinking about responses and reactions, particularly if you are a leader in an organisation and your team is now going through this. You want to be watching for where people are and how you can best support people in moving forwards. But at the end of the day, that, yes, the curve kind of exists and everybody moves through the curve at the same time. They don't actually, everybody goes through the same curve processes, but each individual journey looks completely different. And so that's one of the biggest things that I want people to understand from this, is whatever your response and reaction is to this, it's yours. It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. It doesn't matter whether somebody else has got the time to learn a new language or is out reading books or any of that kind of stuff. Wherever you are in response to this change is where you are, and that's the most important thing. So I've seen a couple of posts over the last week where people are saying, you know, there's all this conflicting advice out there about what I should be doing or shouldn't be doing, or I'm supposed to homeschool kids, or I'm not supposed to homeschool the kids, and I'm supposed to know what I'm doing, and I've got supposed to have all this time to do new things and be DIYing the house. That's lots of people really well intentionally sharing their advice on what's working for them, and it's great. The more that we share those things and suggestions with each other, the more knowledge and power there is for people to draw from. But it doesn't mean that that's the right thing for you, and if you try and do it all, you'll go insane. So pick and choose, right? Look at what's out there. If somebody else has got the time to learn a new language and that's distracting for them and that's helping them feel better, that's brilliant. But that might not be what you need for where you are or your circumstances or what's going on for you. So there's nobody else in the world who is going to transition the way you transition, but there's plenty of people who are going to be going through similar things to you. And so look for that support and look for the things that make sense for you in your situation. And if you are leading other people, look for what might help them given wherever they are on the curve. So before I get into anxiety, does anyone have any questions about the curve, the change process piece, and the challenges of transitioning people through the curve? It doesn't look like. If you do, feel free to ask at any point. But it's a really good, like if you've not seen anything to do with the change curve before, it can be helpful to even just recognise where you are in your own self. So the change curve, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, it's sometimes called the grief curve because that's where it came from originally. That can be really helpful place to start to understand reactions and kind of what happens for people. So one of the things that comes up, when we think about that curve that people go through when they're reacting, we at E3 we'll break it down into three kind of stages. So the first stage is reacting, and that's fully where we are right now. We get on to other stages about resetting and reigniting, which are great, but right now from what I can see, the majority of the world isn't still in full-on reacting, and you would be. The significance of this is enormous, so everybody is going to have the reactions that they're going to have. In that stage, one of the biggest things that we see often from people is anxiety. So uncertainty is a trigger for people. When you think about the things that cause people to have concern, worry, etc., uncertainty is one of the biggest triggers that people have. And right now, we are living in very uncertain times for a lot of people in a lot of different ways, right? We've lost the sense of normalcy that we've had for a long time, and that uncertainty is fairly loud for people. So in some ways, anxiety is a good thing. Anxiety is your brain kind of sending you warning signals to say there's something going on that you should be paying attention to. And in fact, if you were sitting in the denial stage of the curve, you probably wouldn't feel any anxiety because you would be dismissing the change right now. So anxiety tells you, if you're feeling it, if you're waking up and having those moments, anxiety tells you that you are starting to process and starting to get your head around what is going on and how things are going to happen for you, and starting to think about and chew on how you process and engage with the situation that we all find ourselves in. Where anxiety can become an issue, or feeling anxious can become an issue, is when it becomes debilitating, or when you can't find yourself moving forwards, or when you find yourself continually stuck in the same thought patterns. So I want to talk a little bit about how anxiety can show up for people, because it's not always what you think it's going to be. And then I want to talk a little bit about things you can do that help alleviate some of it. So again, if you've got any questions, feel free. So we often have a view about what anxiety can look like for people, but actually it can show up in a whole bunch of different ways. And whether you call it anxiety or you call it stress or worry or whatever else, things like waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to sleep well, being irritated, being unable to focus, finding small things distracting, all those things are a sign that your brain has a lot going on and that you are not in the same mental headspace as that you were before. And you can attribute those things back to carrying a lot of mental headspace, which is essentially what worry or anxiety is. So you might not be having panic attacks, you might not be in that kind of headspace, you might not be breaking down and crying, you might, right? These are all natural reactions to the situation. But anxiety can look like a bunch of different things for a bunch of different people. What's most important is that you acknowledge what's going on for you so that you can figure out doing something about it. And that something might be as simple as acknowledging it. So there's actually a lot of power in naming an emotion. We talk about it in the circles I work in as labeling, right? Calling out how you feel. And for whatever reason, once you label an emotion, you are much better able to manage that emotion than if you don't label it. So even saying to yourself out loud, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling helpless, whatever the word is for you, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling annoyed. As soon as you put a name to that emotion, you are much better placed to actually regulate that emotion, to control it, to do things about it. And so even very simply, taking that moment to pause and say, how am I feeling right now? And to give it a name can be really helpful in moving past and moving forward through that process. So that's the first thing. And it sounds simple. It's not always easy to do in the moment, to take a step back and say, how am I feeling right now? How am I doing? And what's the word that I want to put to that? But try it. So last week I had a few things going on and I was getting really wound up about stuff, but I hadn't named anything. I hadn't put a name to it. And when I finally sat down and said, how am I feeling right now? And I said, I'm feeling really frustrated. And why am I feeling that way? I'm actually offended. I was offended by something. When I labelled those things, all of a sudden, things felt much more manageable than they did before. So labelling, acknowledging, noticing and labelling are really helpful in kind of finding some of that control and that power back. And often when I think about the world of anxiety and where feeling anxious comes from, I kind of tie it back to two things. A sense of loss of hope or power. So if you think about that for a second, when uncertainty in and of itself is neither good or bad, right? It's just uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen next. It's when we feel uncertain in ourselves, we don't trust that something good will happen, or we don't trust our own ability to manage through the situation, or we don't have the trust in what's going to happen next and or confidence in the steps that we can take. That's when anxiety tends to build. So if you're wanting to kind of help yourself with feelings of anxiousness, then getting back to those two things can be helpful. So power, your own personal sense of power and control, and a sense of hope and positivity. Those two things, either of them, or preferably both, can help you work your way through things. And I was listening to something last week that was talking about hope, and I thought it was really interesting because we don't talk about hope in businesses, right? It's not a word you'll see show up in organisations, and yet people run businesses and people are fueled by hope. We are fueled by positivity, we are fueled by looking forwards, we are fueled by seeing opportunity, and so we also need those things to be happening now when we're in a period of uncertainty. So we're looking to figure out, how do you refine that power and how do you refine that hope? So power comes down to what's in your control. It's focusing on the baby steps that you can take. It's paying attention to what is within your scope of influence. What actions can you take? Even if that's as simple as your routine for today, right? What do I have control of right now? How do I take a step forwards? How do I make this next thing that I need to do happen? As I talked about last Monday, be really practical and pragmatic about how much you can do right now. There's nothing worse in this situation than trying to set yourself a 19-thing to-do list and not getting through it all because you don't have the mental headspace for it. So it's the picking the two, it's the focusing on what you can control, it's saying to yourself, okay, so people are ignoring the rules and doing whatever they're doing. I can't control any of that. What can I control? I can control what goes on in my home, I can control my responses, I can control my actions, right? And when we focus in on the things that we have control over, then we start to get some of our own personal power and control back, which starts to reduce some of those feelings. So that can certainly help. And the other bit that goes along with that is the hope and positivity piece. So I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that I think people should pretend this isn't happening. That's not going to work for anybody. There is a reality we're all coming to grips with here, and some bits of it suck. It's pretty much the only way of looking at it. There's some bits of this that suck. But if you only look at that, then that's what starts to suck the energy from you, and that's what starts to make your brain go, so what are we going to do? 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 Right? And that cycle begins. So in all things, there are inherent opportunities, there's positivity, and we are seeing it, right? We are seeing it in terms of the help that people are giving each other. We're seeing it in terms of the creativity that people are bringing to the table, the sheer innovation that is showing up in the way that people work, the way that people are finding to connect with one another, how people still maintain relationships despite the distance between us, the courage and resilience that people show in this type of situation, the clapping for our essential workers, the packages that people are creating for each other, the way that people are evolving their businesses to deal with a new normal. All those things are fundamental examples of the creativity and positivity of human spirit. And those are the things that when we start to cycle down, we have to find and hold on to. Your brain will focus on what you tell it to. Right? And the more you whatever you focus on, you get more of. So in this situation, if you start looking for all the bad stuff and all the challenges and all the problems and all the issues, you will find them, and your brain will then be wired to start finding more of them, and all of a sudden there's a lot more of that than there is of the good stuff. So try to find the time to sit down and look at what's good in all of this. What have I done that I'm proud of right now? What's been in my control, and what are the steps that I've taken and the things that I've accomplished in the last week that I'm really proud of? And, you know, those things seem small, but they make a difference to how we're wired. They make a difference to how we focus, and what you focus on, you get more of, right? So it's really important that we pay attention to where our heads are right now more than ever before. And I will keep banging on about this last point, but it's really important, and it's not an easy one, and it's sleep. And I know it's daft, and I know probably there's a lot of us out there. I'm the same. I've been, you know, my pattern of stress is I wake up at 3:30 in the morning with a bunch of stuff on my mind, and that's been happening in the last couple of weeks. But if we don't get enough stress, we definitely don't need any more stress. If we don't get enough sleep, our brains are wired to encode the bad experiences first and the good stuff after. Right? So you need to make sure that you're getting enough sleep so that you maintain the headspace to find the positives and to be realistic about things, right? So again, I'm not saying this is all rah-rah camp at all. I'm saying that what we focus on, we get more of. If you get sucked into all the stuff you'll see on social media, you'll see all those reactions I talked about earlier, the shock, the denial, the anger and the blame, and that will pull you into. I know, because every time I see the social media comments, I have to turn them off, right? So don't do that. You're focusing on how can I set myself up to feel the power that I have, to use anxiety as a trigger to say, okay, what can I do in this situation, and to make sure that I'm focusing on finding the positive and getting enough sleep so that I'm mentally where I can be to deal with the situation. And remember that anxiety is a trigger about things that are going on, so it's a good sign that you are in some ways moving through the process. We just don't want it to be something that becomes debilitating or problematic for us. Right? And if you are ending up there are lots of people out there that can help with that side of things. I'm not a mental health expert by any stretch of the imagination. What we do is help people understand change, and so that's what I'm talking about this morning, all the responses and reactions to change. If you're finding yourself in a place where it's difficult to function, use the resources that are out there and disposable to you right now. There are them out there. Bridge the Gap from the government, for example, is a great resource. If you need to talk to somebody, if you're finding that you can't get yourself out of the cycles that you're in, it's definitely there to help you. So those were my comments this morning. Like, the change curve is a really good place to start for understanding reactions to change, and you will see them. You will see them everywhere right now. Like, every time I go on social media or I turn on the TV, I see shock, I see denial, I see anger, I see blame. We are in the reacting stage of change. It is normal. Try and identify where you think you are and what you need to keep moving on through that curve. Right? Anxiety is a part of reacting. Anxiety, the feelings of anxiousness are going to show up in that stage. So notice them. Notice it for what it is, which is a flag. There's lots going on for you right now. If you can notice it and let it go, great. If you can't, try going back to, how do I increase my sense of power? How do I control? How do I sense my feelings of hope? Because what you focus on, you get more of. So if you focus on what you can control and you focus on what's positive for you, that's what your brain will start looking for. Okay. Hopefully that's helpful for everybody. If you are a member on the website, we do have courses in there that are around change, that talk about the change curve and talk about the stages that people go through and the things that you can do for each of those stages. So that's there for you, to help you. Or, you know, if you've got a question, please reach out to me. Like, these are challenging times for everybody, and we are here to help in the best way that we can. So if you've got a question about you or what's going on in your team, or you just want to understand something around the change, the way that change works for people, you can email me at jchapman@e3.ca, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can with whatever I can give or share to help. Are there any questions before I wrap up for this morning for anyone? It always takes a minute or two for things to show up on my screen. I don't have any. Oh, good. Everybody's good. Marvellous. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out. Nice to see you, Cindy. Thank you. And if there's anything we can do, help. Same for you, Sharon. Anything you need, feel free to connect. We'll be here again next week. So I'm going to do this every Monday now until we know what's going on. Be safe. Be happy. Like, there's things going on that are outside of our control, but we have more power than we think we do. Please do reach out if there's anything we can do to help. I'll see you again next Monday, and if there's any topics you'd like us to talk about or anything that you'd love a Facebook Live on, please let me know, and I will factor that into the way that we look at the schedule. All right. Have a good day and a good week, and remember to think about all the positive things and keep yourselves in that good headspace. All right. Take care.